already. Mhm. Okay, I believe we are online and it started 0 minutes ago. So, welcome everyone. We have like 10 people around, but I believe we can start already. We have today really interesting topic to discuss. It's security challenges in like under the MiCA and overall in the Web3 area. And today we invited really good guest, Anoop, who is really uh, like professional security related person with CEO of Trugard, and Trugard is leading and VC-backed Web3 security in threat intelligence automation firm, focusing on preventing and improving safety and security in digital assets stakeholders. Anu previously took leadership roles at AWS and Cisco, leading team, and deliver world-class blockchain-based solution for them. Also, Anu participated in numerous enterprise blockchain industry initiatives, including service as co-founder and chair of the Trusted IoT Alliance, the world's first blockchain and IoT industry group. Anu, you can tell a little bit from your point of view to our audience.
Yeah, no, thanks for that wonderful introduction, Vadim. It's been an interesting journey. I've been in the blockchain space over 10 years now, and really trying to look at what are the opportunities where we can apply this technology in novel business use cases and novel technology scenarios, and how do we simplify the language with which we use to communicate and describe blockchain technology? And I feel like we still have a lot of work to be done there. But
Yes.
these are the kinds of the themes and the challenges that I've been working on over the last decade in this space, including some of the work that we were doing at the Trusted IoT Alliance, where we did amazing projects like blockchain enabling an electric Jaguar, and then driving it from Barcelona to Berlin, charged, parked, insured, using not just one type of crypto, but multiple crypto assets, right? And so one of the things that we were very proud of back then was we actually built the world's first, interoperability sandbox, where we could actually demonstrate some of these capabilities. We later merged with the Industrial Internet Consortium, and they've continued the work. But in general, I would say, one of the things that I think we still have to address is just how do we simplify this all?
Okay. Anoop, thank you for introduction of yourself, of your previous work, because today we have really hot topic. I believe everybody is talking about the Bybit and the beginning of the year. It's a like hugest hack of the Web3 project and centralized exchange all over the time at this moment. Maybe later it will be more. I hope not. But we definitely should discuss this later on our conversation and
Certainly.
your point of view of this situation overall. So I just want to start with a small agenda, what we will talk about. And first of all, here we are about the MiCA compliance and security implication, because MiCA and DORA definitely define the level of approach to the security questions, not only money laundering, but security of the project and mostly of custody security of the customer funds. And we are talking right now about the Web3 definitely, but it's definitely touch Web2 security in total. That what approaches. It's not Wild West anymore. We should implement some risk measurements, monitoring system. We should think about how transaction signed, what the architecture of hot and cold wallet should be implemented, and we will discuss definitely this. And later we will discuss the like Bybit situation and why even big players can be vulnerable to the hacks nowadays, and how can it be prevented. Let's start with my part. My name is Vadim Rozov. I'm host of this webinar, and I am also CEO of Simplify Labs. We are providing software solution for centralized exchanges. It's MiCA compliant. We are focusing on European market and implementation of requirements for MiCA itself. And our software, it's white label software that can be used for not only to apply for the MiCA and operate under the MiCA, but to like first time to minimize types to market and start working and serving for the clients. I just want to start with a small like poll questions. We have let me share our checklist for the MiCA we have prepared. It's not really clear to see from, but I read some questions. And guys, if you ready to answer, like put some smile in the chat, or if you hear us and can answer the question, put plus or some smile. Okay, we can see it. Good. So the first question will be what countries you operate in, if you are operating currently. So this is, can you write down, is it the Eurozone area or not? What countries? It one. Cool. Global. Good. And this is, we have prepared this MiCA checklist to Baltics. Okay. You can go after the webinar, you can contact me directly through the link. I believe Kate will share it, and Anoop, if you have some questions to him or over the LinkedIn. And we will share this checklist for you and discuss your current needs. So the like biggest, like the first question which should be asked, is your IT architecture system defined in writing? So for MiCA. This we will return to the question in Q&A session about where to apply and from our experience. But please contact. Yeah, okay. You can book a meeting with me also through this link to receive this MiCA checklist later and answer. I will answer your question. Let's return to our presentation. So the biggest, biggest challenge for any centralized exchange and any Web3 project at this moment is to safeguard the custody of the clients, and one of the big part of the requirements for the MiCA related to this custody service. So this is starting from the cold storage implementation, and our solution provides this as a part of our MiCA compliance. So you should first of all have like cold wallet infrastructure. It must be maintained on completely offline devices. which never connected to the internet directly. And second, it's multi-signature implementation of multi-signature. It should be from 3 up to 5 or higher signs to make a transfer. And the next one is requirements for hot wallet security. So any hot wallet of yours shouldn't contain more than minimum funds needed for daily operations. So it should be less than 5% of total assets you have. And the second, it's segmentation. Definitely implement multiple segregated hot wallets rather than single one hot wallet. Another big requirements, and it's just matter of understanding of this, it's automated monitoring. So it should be implemented real-time transaction monitoring with detection of anomaly in case of something happen wrong. And of course, we are talking about rate limiting. So it shouldn't be like by bits that they used taking all assets from one hot wallet and move it to another one without detection from the automatically system. So it should be rate limit implementation. And of course, one of the requirements, it's whitelisting. It should be implemented some list of trusted the addresses where funds can be moved before. So it's two-step system. When you first add to whitelist the trusted address, which should be approved from the several stakeholders, and then funds can be moved to this. And of course, with a big part is key management protocols, and how a key generated and where it's stored, and who has access to what systems. And of course, no one should have direct access to this key. No real person, live person, should have access to this key and storage itself. And if we are talking about further step, you should have access control mechanism, and it should be multi-level authorization, role-based access, and it's good to have time-locked transactions inside and biometric verifications. So this is part of total understanding how security should work itself. So right now, a lot of, in general, approaches, I believe it's taken from Web 2. Anoop can jump in and help me, and then define it as a MiCA requirement. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. No, Vadim, I think what you described is kind of a pragmatic approach to driving, less so from a crypto perspective and just more so from here's a traditional kind of enterprise-driven security paradigm, right? I'm a big believer in perimeterless security models, right? Which is, let's assume your enterprise, your business, your company, your centralized exchange in this case is already compromised, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are the layers of security and checklists and defense in depth that is actually required to not only monitor and identify when systems are being connected to, but then the subsequent transactions that are actually executed and the workloads that are actually executed, right? So it's a combination of how do we bring the best of breed of, let's just call it, Web 2 classical cybersecurity, defense in depth strategies and methodologies, and apply them to Web 3. If you look at the components that exist in Web 3, I mean, they are all still fundamentally Web 2 components, right? We talk about, custody infrastructure. Well, classically, that is built on, very advanced, sophisticated HSMs, right?
Mm-hmm.
With now proprietary and in some cases custom firmware that allows for those HSMs to be leveraged and tuned for digital asset use cases, right? But fundamentally, it's an HSM. There is a key ceremony that is executed. There is typically a physical card that must be inserted into an HSM, or some way to physically attest to an interaction with a physical appliance. And therefore, now you have the ability to perform updates and what have you. The notion of keeping this infrastructure disconnected from the internet, I think it is not possible to stress how important that is. And while I agree everybody is generally doing that, in some cases, and I've seen this before, the cold custody infrastructure isn't as exactly disconnected from the internet as it should be, right? So some folks have actually, say, hey, we'll create microsegmentation within our networks, and we'll put various layers of defenses, not only kind of traditional firewalls, but intrusion detection, intrusion prevention net systems, and then monitoring all of the flows that exist within the infrastructure, right? That may not be good enough.
Yeah, but if you're comparing it with traditional banking system in general, it's not as fast as was as it is right now in crypto. So even if you make a transaction from the hot wallet of the bank, let's say, so is it if it possible or not, it will take hours or days to make some additional actions to it, to send to multiple accounts in the same time, to and hide it from, let's say, if it even possible. I'm not sure, but in crypto sphere you can just take this one transaction in one, I don't know, 5 minutes and swipe $1.5 billion.
Yeah, and I think that is a very important but subtle point that I think people often don't appreciate, right? Is that the velocity of the assets in crypto is 1,000 times faster than in fiat, right? Now, we also need to be able to separate technology from market structure, right? I mean, real-time trading and settlement has existed in classical banking and capital markets for decades. The reason why it's not done is because the market structure doesn't require it, right? And the market structure is quite simply this: anyone who's been developing solutions and technology in Web3 will be familiar with the float that is prevalent within, let's say, traditional capital or TradFi, capital markets and whatnot, right? And that is that there is a requirement that post settlement, the institutions involved have up to 3 days to actually close the transaction, which means that there is 3 days with which these assets are not quite sitting in limbo. These are loaned out, loan payback. There's other investments that can be made in that 3-day period prior to a transaction being made final and so.
Such a big transaction, it definitely will not be executed immediately, right?
Absolutely, right. And so they're and largely driven by the fact that these are large value transactions. So there's a lot of liquidity that is kind of in this floating period that is used multiple times before a transaction is required to sell. So the market structure dictates of TradFi dictates that hey, there's an opportunity to make money, and so people will want to make money. The technology of itself, there are no barriers in traditional finance that prevent the technology from doing real-time trading and settlement. I mean, NASDAQ has been selling this kind of technology for decades, right? The shift here to Web3 and just digital assets in general is that people have realized that if you can actually close out your transactions and settle those, you can actually do a higher volume of transactions. So it may be true that maybe the transaction sizes may be a fraction of what exists in TradFi, but the fact that you can do 1,000 of these transactions over the course of minutes means that you actually can take advantage of economies of scale. right?
Okay. Okay.
And so there is a difference in expectation of the market structure and the technology that we've created over the last 15 years or so in the blockchain space have really kind of leaned themselves very, very nicely towards high volume throughput, high volume transactions, independent of transaction size, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so it's a recognition that the market structure is changing. It's changing, I would say for the better.
Mm-hmm.
And because at the same time, we're also getting all of the byproducts of, or the value attributes that we expect from blockchain technologies, the transparency, the audit trail, all of that. So there is that delineation. And I think for most folks who are coming into this space, they have to acknowledge or at least be aware of the velocity of the assets is 1,000 times faster, right? And so
Yeah.
and that's what we see, hackers taking advantage of, right? In our space is the fact that they can move a high volume of assets or execute a high volume of transactions, and those transactions are settled within, let's say, the next block or two,
Mm-hmm.
um, which can range from anywhere between a half second to, in the case of Bitcoin, maybe up to 90 minutes, right? But still, even at 90 minutes, that's several orders of magnitude faster than the market structure allows for in TradFi, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so now the question is how do we establish the right kind of high frequency, high volume defensive mechanisms within these organizations and enterprises such that they can actually respond in a timely manner. And I think that's one of the things that MiCA is trying to uh, uh, outline is, you're going to require a fast evolving, highly responsive security infrastructure to protect users, right? And they don't really go into kind of the nuances of cybersecurity requirements, but you can actually kind of read into what the potential opportunities are.
From your experience, Anoop, can you tell me how your company is helping other entrepreneurs or centralized saving exchange or maybe decentralized to prevent this? What you're doing for inside your company for that?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for the opportunity to talk about Trugard. So fundamentally, Trugard was born out of a realization that we do need better cybersecurity in Web3, right? I don't think anybody can argue against that. And there are, companies out there who are doing transaction monitoring, transaction forensics, and I think that's very important. The kind of the know your transaction concepts. We decided to look at and go very deep on kind of real-time cybersecurity risk from a smart contract perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, just a level set, right? And so a smart contract is a function or a piece of software that exists on a blockchain network, which is responsive to inputs, and it generates certain outputs, and is basically control logic for the governance and the management, the issuance of a digital asset and how it's distributed, what are the controls that need to be put in place, and what have you. And so we look at a smart contract very much, in the same light that we would look at or consider a network controller, right?
Mm-hmm.
So our team, our team has a long career in network infrastructure and cybersecurity and how do you secure networks, IP networks, not blockchain networks, but IP networks. And what are all the tools, the best of breed technologies, procedures, and practices, and how do we bring that to the Web3 space where we consider it and we draw analogies to securing IP infrastructure to now securing digital asset infrastructure, right? And so the notion here is that every company has a network, Every company that is connected to the internet has a network. There is some kind of a central controller that basically governs the movement, the distribution, and is aware of data and packet flows within that confines. And that is the device that is responsible for also provisioning downstream infrastructure as well. So and applying rules and policies. The analogy that we drew was, well, if somebody were to discover or inject a vulnerability or a hack in a network controller, they fundamentally have the keys to the castle, right? In that they can control data, they can control the distribution, they can sniff it, they can steal the data, they can destroy data, they can turn off certain pieces of infrastructure. So there's a lot at risk when a controller is compromised.
Mm-hmm.
And we said, okay, well, let's take those principles and apply them to smart contracts. Whereas, kind of our analogy is further extended as, yes, a smart contract operates on a decentralized operating environment, a decentralized infrastructure, but it is the central controller for the movement and the issuance and the governance of the digital assets that come from it. Right?
It's like
So
an internal controller for the one company, yes. So inside
in
the
essence,
decentralized, yes.
in essence, right? And so and every company has multiple network controllers for different facilities, different locations. And similarly, we see the same paradigm in Web3, where an exchange may have multiple contracts that are on chain that they interact with as their primary interface to the network, right? Same principles apply here. In if somebody were to discover or inject an exploit into that smart contract, they have literally the keys to the castle, right? And so we said, as a business, let's understand the scope and the veracity of potentially compromised or compromisable smart contracts that exist within Web3. And so we've basically built our business where we constantly consume smart contracts at scale across networks, going back all the way to Genesis and keeping up with TIP. Today we support 6 networks, currently all EVM networks, and for every contract that we onboard, and we onboard them in real time, we pass that contract through a detection suite of about 5,000 different risk parameters that we look for, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that is executed by a combination of, classical cybersecurity techniques as well as machine learning and AI models, right? So all in all, about 5,000 different parameters that we look for, that we process every contract that we onboard, and we onboard about 50,000 a day when we're running at full tilt.
Mm-hmm.
And what that has generated for us is, over the last few years that we've been doing this, we've onboarded and indexed over 21 million smart contracts. We have identified over 2 million smart contracts that are actively malicious, in that if you were to execute a transaction against it, your assets will either be destroyed, stolen, or redirected someplace else. And so we've identified about 2 million of these. There is actual transaction volume going through them. And we've identified somewhere between 300,000 and 400,000 wallets that are constantly deploying these contracts, right? And so we've indexed all of this. We've measured the contracts that we onboard. And as a byproduct of what we do, we actually create a composable digital fingerprint of every contract that we onboard. And the value of that is that if you're a security researcher, or you're someone who's trying to understand and create, let's say, potentially new machine learning models around smart contract risk, you can use our data platform to actually fine-tune your design, your algorithm, your machine learning model to hone in on very specific facets or features of a smart contract, of a collection of smart contracts, and actually build out your model. And I think this is really interesting because what we're able to do by going through such a fine, granular, detailed inspection of every contract is essentially identify coding styles, right? So every hacker, not every hacker, every software developer has a unique coding style, and that translates directly to hackers. So, you're essentially,
Mm-hmm.
in essence, fingerprinting the developer. We don't know who the developers are. We have partners that we would work with that, if we do find, highly
Mm-hmm.
suspicious smart contracts, we'll work with them to figure out who those individuals are or groups are. But the value here is that not only are we able to identify the kind of cross chain and cross protocol
Uh-huh.
risk attributes, we're actually also able to identify certain threads. So, for example, we have using the fine grained fingerprint technique that we have, we've identified campaigns of malicious smart contract deployments. We posted an article about one back in April of last year where we identified a campaign of malicious contract deployments deployed across 5 blockchain networks
Mm-hmm.
consisting of about 67 different smart contracts. Right
Mm-hmm.
now,
So it's
in a
highly organized group of people who is doing this on purpose.
Absolutely, absolutely, right. And we, in that article, and maybe we can share it later. We actually show the data of not only the timestamps of the wallet and the wallets that are deploying these contracts, and when you graph it out visually, it is abundantly clear that this is a campaign because there is no random behavior whatsoever, right? And
Mm-hmm.
again, users of our platform can use these insights to develop their own models, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what we've discovered in that is that a lot of these hackers are not going after kind of they're not trying to push the big, in this case, the $1.4 billion exploit that was done with Bybit. They're doing the smaller hacks, the $5,000, the $10,000, the $500 exploits, right? So these are
Mm-hmm.
generally undocumented, unreported, undiscovered. In many cases, people have simply forgot to interact with or check in on their wallets, right? And so they go undiscovered for long periods of time. And so we've identified this, and over the course of a year and a half, and this campaign is still active, by the way,
Mm-hmm.
with new contracts being deployed every couple of weeks. This network has stolen, we estimate, about $500 million over the
Oh,
course of a year. But
yeah.
it's not a single attack, a single exploit, right? This is a campaign. It's an evolution of the advanced persistent threat where the hackers or the bad actors are totally okay with biding their time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And not being discovered immediately by executing such a massive, exploit. So how we kind of leverage this information, or how customers would be able to leverage all of these insights, let's say in support of MiCA requirements, is to actually enable kind of pre-transaction due diligence by providing kind of a real-time query against a contract that is that is you're being asked about. So let's say you're a custodian and you're being asked to custody a certain set of assets. Well, what was the quality of the smart contract that those assets came from, right? Um, and and even though that contract might be clean, what is the quality of the author of the contract, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And because we've indexed all of this, in the scenario where you're being asked to custody an asset that came from a given contract, and that contract checks all the right security boxes, it's clean. The author of the document of that contract may have published, let's say in total, let's say for argument's sake, 10 smart contracts, and that is one of 2 that are clean. The remaining 8 are malicious or have a certain degree of risk to it. Should you
Mm-hmm.
still, the consideration you should make is, should you still custody that asset that came from a contract, even though it's clean, but the deployer has a reputation of deploying bad contracts, right?
Okay.
So it's about going the next level of detail down and really understanding and scoping the risk appropriately, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think so typically we look at, custodian will look at, they'll try and grab, an audit report or several audit reports for a given contract. And we all know that not all smart contract auditors are created equal, right? And so you do need, multiple audits, multiple reviews. But in general, less than 1% of smart contracts that are deployed in the entire blockchain industry, independent of what network or protocol, have source code that is available to review. Less than 1%, which
Mm-hmm.
means 99% of the contracts that are out there, nobody has any visibility into what is actually in them. How do they actually operate? How do they actually function? Right? Yet there's transaction volume going through. And so, we feel that there is a large volume of smart contracts that are kind of sitting there dormant, where
Mm-hmm.
there are exploits just waiting to be discovered. And so that's what we've decided to do is, let's go in and try and ingest and index as many smart contracts as possible, understand the trajectory of risk that
Okay.
exists in these protocols, and then figure out, how do we actually communicate those risks and challenges to users and customers.
Okay, Anoop. Uh, yeah, I believe it's a really complex conversation, how it's working and how you're helping. But I have really like question which is really simple, but from my point of view, but important for centralized exchange, I believe.
Uh-huh.
So as I know, let's talk first of all about hot wallet infrastructure in general. So for the most EVM blockchains, it's impossible to implement multi-signature infrastructure. You should build it on your own or with help with somebody with smart contracts. So, for example, for Ethereum, it's impossible. You should create smart contract for that to implement multi-signature. Uh, and as I understand, in general, this is the possibility to try to by bit how it was uh, like implemented or to exploit this situation. So they were using Safe as a smart contract implementation for
Mhm.
multi-signature, and smart contract itself already deployed to blockchain. You can't replace it, yes, but you can like if you're building a multi-layer system of smart contracts, on some
Yeah.
point of this layer, you can put some like hack inside or to replace something interesting for the hackers to receive this data to implement this controller, as you mentioned. Am I right in this understanding of what happened?
Yeah, I mean that seems to be the general consensus, right? Safe was used as the wallet infrastructure, but I think it goes beyond that, right? I mean, as I'm understanding it, what and I think we believe it is the Lazarus Group out of North Korea that actually executed this.
Yeah.
Um, but what they actually did was an evolution, as I described earlier, of a new form of advanced persistent threat, right? In that this was a coordinated effort. It was fundamentally, I would say, an evolution of a phishing campaign, right?
Hmm.
The instantiation, the deployment of fake websites, DNS registrations, what have you, and I've seen even more advanced cybersecurity vulnerabilities attacking healthcare. But this is what was actually executed was, as I describe it, or as I think of it, was a classical Web 2
Hmm.
uh, 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 classical Web 2 campaign designed to extract information out of individuals, right? And that information, once extracted, allowed the hackers to basically bypass, the controls and security components that were in place, right? And we always say in cybersecurity the human is the weakest link, right? Because you go
Mm-hmm.
back to every attack, every exploit, every compromise, and including in Web3, and that's generally been the case, right? I mean, people don't generally attack the protocols themselves. The protocols generally work, right? They do as they function. They're generally secure. And frankly, it's a lot of effort to attack a blockchain network. So why do that? Instead, what they're doing is they're compromising the individuals, right? Again,
Yeah, and
classic
regarding this,
Web2 campaign.
I have like question to you. Maybe you previously heard about this, but I have found that Lazarus in 2000, like in total, stolen about $6 billion in like for the last 3 years or something like that. This was
Yep.
the biggest one, but 6 billion. So, and what? And one of the requirements from the MiCA is physical security of the
Mm-hmm.
like implementation, like physical security measures, including
Yep.
like CCTV monitoring, access control, and so on and so forth. What prevent this organization with a huge amount of money, with I believe this is really organized or like semi, let's say military organization in general, I believe, to make physical like let's say attack to the people. I'm not talking about physical attacking them and take the keys, but like a spy and like some degree of for $1.5 billion, you can do a lot of things. I believe even
Yeah.
find the way to the like personal area of these people, to the spying for the families and so on and
Yeah.
so forth. So is it somewhere discussed? Because right now crypto is on top of vulnerability, like of the let's say crypto area. We heard about a lot of situation when individuals was like physically stolen and forced to move crypto from personal wallets and so on. Is it right now centralized exchange is under the pressure of this physical even attacking or not? Have you heard something?
I would say that has always been the case. That's been the case for over a decade.
Mhm.
Argentina was one of the first, one of the earliest countries to really, get behind Bitcoin and introduce it to its citizens, right? And so,
Mhm.
Argentina, as we all know, is been perpetually under financial stress, what have you, and so what's happened over the last couple of years, well, actually not the early days, when Argentina did this, is they provided physical locations where people could go in and purchase Bitcoin.
Okay.
So they take their wallet, they take their digital wallet, they take their fiat wallet, they walk into this location, they exchange, they walk out, and organized crime is just sitting outside waiting and basically just kidnapping people and getting people to reveal the keys to their now physical crypto wallet, right? So this has
Mm-hmm.
been a problem for a long time. This is not a new problem. Yes, I would argue that centralized exchanges are a target, and it's target for multiple reasons, right? It's not so much so that just because they're centralized, although that is a big component. I would argue that they're a target because if you look at kind of the difference in the user experience, just as an investor, crypto investor, right? The
Mm-hmm.
experience that centralized exchanges and the advantage that they have over decentralized exchanges is they have actually spent time, money, energy, and resources in creating a very good user experience.
Mm-hmm.
DeFi is still very cumbersome to interact with, right? And because of that, I think most retail users are not really comfortable with decentralized exchanges just yet, although that may change. But they're more comfortable with a centralized exchange because they're coming at it generally with the experience of working with a bank, right? You walk into a location, you can do things online. It's a trusted brand. It's protected. It's underwritten. It's insured. All this stuff, and there's comfort in that, right? And as a result of that, we've seen a lot of liquidity pour into these centralized exchanges. Again, they've been rewarded in essence for solving some very hard problems in this space. That said, they are obviously targets, right? And specifically, I would argue, the leadership, the IT teams, and principally the compliance and the investigation teams
Mm-hmm.
are the ones that are targeted, right? Um, and so we've seen over the last couple of years, leadership teams of these centralized exchanges now have personal security, and they're doing all the right things to protect themselves. No different than a Fortune 100 company executive, right? So this is not unique. This is just an evolution of where we are in terms of business in crypto. So I think there is absolutely that personal and physical risk that exists. Not just at the leadership team, but with individuals that are responsible for, let's say, your compliance processing, right? Subpoena processing. There's risk there. There's also the physical infrastructure risk, right? You talk about data centers.
Yes.
A lot of folks have a lot of the industry is deployed on AWS, right? And believe me, as a former AWS executive, like the amount of physical security or security that is applied to the physical data centers is amazing, right? But when you deploy off of the cloud and say into a colo or into your own data center, you don't necessarily have the budget, the resources to put in the appropriate physical security mechanisms, right? So there's a risk there. And then on top of that, we've seen cases where individuals are simply compromised, right? Or they become compromised in one form or another. And then, to your point earlier, we are absolutely seeing, not just in crypto, but across the entire industry, cybersecurity, AI, telecommunications, hackers being brought on to
Mm-hmm.
basically try to compromise companies, right? And so with all this happening, and this is not a future, this is not how things are happening. This is happening now, right? There are cases going back a decade, maybe more so, where organized crime compromised IT systems for pharmaceutical companies and employed their own drivers,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so now you have cancer fighting drugs that are being stolen as an inside job and sold on the black market, right? This is nothing
Mm-hmm.
new, right? And so this is absolutely going to happen. It is already happening in crypto. And that's why we need more advanced, more fine grained security mechanisms, both physical and digital, that go all the way down to not only monitoring the transaction of these highly controlled wallets, these controlled assets, and the individuals that are engaging with them, but it's also rolling in and making sure, like, hey, we've got the role-based access controls. Those are in place. Those policies are being forced. How do we know those policies haven't been compromised, right? How do we know that the individuals responsible for making changes to those policies haven't been compromised, or the systems that are connected? So we're going to see, and I hope we see a massive evolution in kind of the intersection of classical IT security as it relates to and ties to digital assets,
Uh,
because of the comment that we made earlier, which is when these assets are moved or stolen, the velocity with which they move is 1,000 times faster.
yes. Uh, I believe we have go out of the time, and if somebody has some questions regarding our conversation, please write down. Meanwhile, I just want to thank you, Anoop, very much for your time, and I hope you will find as many hackers and crime as you possibly can, because it's really good for the society and for the entrepreneurs. I believe in the beginning when crypto area just started, it was
Yeah.
the idea that we are not as a big enterprise. We will be like individuals doing some
Hmm.
high programming things, and no banks needed, nothing centralized. Everything should
Yeah.
be in the cloud, in the blockchain. But it's from the other side, really smart, but not so, let's say, good-willing people also working on from the other side, trying to use this advantage as an advantage to their work.
Absolutely, and I think that's the one thing that we often have to remind ourselves is that the bad actors and the hackers in our industry are just as innovative as someone who is building, the most advanced, highly scalable technology in Web3. We can't assume that all innovation is for the good, right? And
Of
so
course.
that's a reality. We have to remind people of that often.
Okay. Thank you for your time, Anoop. And don't forget, guys, to ping in LinkedIn or over email us if you want to continue conversation. Also, you can use Calendly to book appointment with me. And see you next time. Ciao.